Why? 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 Have you ever actually just sat and thought, why am I doing what I'm doing? It's a really, really uncomfortable question for a lot of people, and you can go your whole life without thinking about it, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. Today, we're going to figure out why. Welcome back to Break the Meta. Okay, guys, so the question today is why? Why do we do the things that we do? And it could be things that are intentional or unintentional. And specifically, I want to address the things that are unintentional. You know, as I said in the intro, this is a very uncomfortable question. Maybe not for you, but definitely for me. Whenever I started to address my whys for doing things, it broke open a lot of crap inside of me that I was embarrassed of, and it honestly just wasn't good. It's almost like I was at war with the expectations of the world and who I actually was. And for a long time, I hated who I was. I hated everything that was in here, and I hated everything that came out of here because of what was in here. You know, the Bible says it's not what comes into a man that defiles him, but what comes out. And that's man, it's so true. You know, everything that was inside of me for the longest time that came out unintentionally was stuff that came out just to protect myself, to defend who I was, to guard what I thought my value was, because I always felt like my value was being challenged. And stopping to ask myself why really challenged me. So as we go through this, if you feel challenged, if you feel discouraged, if you feel overwhelmed, that's okay, especially if you've not been intentional about things a lot in your life. We don't start out as intentional people. Intentionality is something that you have to hone. It's something that you have to be, oddly enough, intentional about. So it's a process. I want to challenge you to give yourself grace for that and just understand that it takes time, and that's okay. So why don't we define the reasons for why we do things or why we allow things in our lives? And I'm just thinking about through my life how there's so much stuff that maintained. And by maintained, I mean things that just happened time after time after time. Things that were present in my life that just seemed to be there, like debt, like lack of relationships, like addictions. Why were those things there? Why were they present? You know, at some of the lower points in my life, I was very unhappy with how everything was. I didn't like my life. I didn't like where I was. And I would escape into things like video games or pornography or spending money. Man, I was horrible with money when I was younger. I remember when I started dating my wife, I had $0 saved up, and I really didn't have many bills. You know, I was living with a few buddies at the time, and my rent was I think $300 a month plus utilities, and utilities were like $125. And I was making about $2,000 to $3,000 a month. So obviously I had a lot of extra money left over, but all of it was just spent on crap, man. Like you look around my room now, I have a little watermelon over here. I've got a guitar and a light. But in my old room, when I was living with those roommates, I had a bunch of stuff, dude. Like you'd walk in my room and I'd have plush toys. I would have action figures. You know, you would see stacked up plates of takeout, and the takeout wasn't cheap. You know, it was like $10 to $15 per thing. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't like my situation in life. I wish I had a house. But I never actually challenged why I spent money the way that I did. I never asked myself why I let this food pile up on my desk. It's just, that's how it was. And as I started addressing those whys, a lot of feelings came up, you know? I started thinking to myself, oh, I just must be a crappy individual because I'm bad with money and I'm really messy. I have freaking China Chang or whatever takeout I had over here growing mold, and I'm a grown ass man. You know, I'm sitting here 30, 28, I don't remember how old I was, but I was old enough to know better. I just didn't change. You know, I allowed that in my life. And when I started asking myself why, I started thinking I should know better. You know, it's always those moments when you start asking why that you realize, I should know better. And that's a very condemning thought that you can have, especially when you're trying to turn your life around, because it almost defeats you before you get started. And man, I really, really dealt with that. And it's paralyzing. You know, it's paralyzing to think, oh, I should know better. I mean, it's a truth, you know, well, actually, is it a truth? It makes sense to think that you should know better. But that's what growth is. Growth is going into spaces that you've never been before, whether you should have been taught that, whether it has been modeled for you and you should have paid attention or not. You're going into an unfamiliar circumstance and you're learning things. And there's a learning curve with that, which takes time, patience, and grace. It also takes accountability. But the most important thing is it takes intentionality. And as you navigate those new things, you have to remember that there's stuff that you're going to learn at your pace, at your level of humility. And I say humility specifically because you can't grow and be prideful at the same time. And that's where condemnation comes from in all this. The condemnation comes from thinking, oh, I should be farther along than where I should be. Or you don't want to address the why because you think, oh, well, I don't want to think that I'm less than I actually am. So I'm going to overcompensate. And when that is tested and when it's pressed, I'm going to respond in fear. I'm going to respond in anger. I'm going to respond in... But anyways, I remember looking at all that stuff and I started thinking, man, I am really unsatisfied with what's present in my life. So why am I letting it happen? Why is it here in the first place? Why am I allowing this when I have the absolute ability to change it? So if you know any of my story, when I was going through my 20s, finances were a big thing for my family. And I say a big thing, it's a big thing for everybody. You know, you can't live without it. And there's that adage that says money can't buy you happiness. And then you have the people that say, well, it'll definitely buy me happiness. Give me $1 million and I'll prove to you that it can buy me happiness. You know, I'm thinking, honestly, right now, there's a bunch of stuff that I could go out and buy right now that would make me really happy. But happiness doesn't always equate to fulfilledness, if that's a word. You know, being happy doesn't always satisfy you. Anyway, we had issues with money, and by we, I say myself, my brother, my mom, and my dad, because we didn't really know how to handle money well. My parents were never taught those processes. I was never taught those processes. Scratch that. Those processes were modeled for me in so many different ways, and I just didn't pay attention to them because I didn't want to. It required a sacrifice that I wasn't willing to make. But navigating that and allowing my pride to say, no, don't address this, don't define your why, it caused me to just avoid the problem and escape it. And for the longest time, I thought to myself, I don't need to save money. It feels good just to spend this money on whatever, whether it was going out with a girl, whether it was buying a $150 bag, whatever. You know, since I didn't address my why and I didn't really have a goal, it was a lot easier just to stay in that place. But year after year, as my problem maintained, I didn't address it. I just fed it. I worked at GameStop, and being a gamer working at GameStop in the early 2000s was quite awesome. We got discounts. We got a ton of games. Every time we would get shipment, new, cool, really cool stuff would come in, and I would want it. And that's how I got all the crap that was in my room back when I lived with my friends. And being in a place like that, it was cool because it was meeting my needs. You know, I was working there. I was doing super well. I was learning how to be social. I was learning how to engage people. I was learning a lot of skills. But it was also a really unhealthy place because I didn't really know how to cut myself off. I'd never learned that life lesson, you know. And I guess another term for cutting yourself off would be sacrifice. I didn't know, or I hadn't learned that sacrifice was necessary to grow in a certain area. There was a trade-off that I had to make. And my trade-off was that I was giving up my financial health and I was giving up my value health just to placate myself in the moment because I liked this plush of Charmander. Or I wanted this collector's edition of a video game, and I rationalized it because it was limited time. There were going to be limited amounts, and if I didn't strike while the iron was hot, I'd never be able to get it again in the future. It was a mentality, almost like a hoarder mentality, thinking that I had to have this stuff. I had to have it. I needed it. It's almost like, wow, it was almost like Gollum. I need my precious. And that's how it feels like for a lot of people when you don't understand that you're entrenched in a really bad behavioral process or a really bad heart or mind process, and that's what addiction is. Addiction is where you're filling yourself with something that's artificial, thinking that it's going to give you the satisfaction that you truly want without the expense of something, of it costing you something. And guys, growth always costs you something. As the years went on, I kept saying no to relationships on the basis of I'm not good enough. And for me, saying I'm not good enough was I can't support a family. I can't buy a house. I can barely afford my car. I can barely afford myself when, I obviously could. I was just spending all my money on stupid stuff instead of sacrificing the in-the-moment desire for something that was better, delayed gratification. But I was getting really lonely. And I had poor credit. I had a credit card. I think the credit limit was $3,500 or so. And I remember I was in Amway back then, and we would go out frequently with me and a few of my buddies, and we would eat at Chili's. And when we would eat at Chili's, we would always just get whatever we wanted, or at least I would. I would buy, I don't know, a $17 entree and leave a $30 tip because I had a credit card, and I was never I was either never told how to use it properly, or if I was told or taught how to use it properly, I didn't absorb it and think that I should have. I just thought, oh, well, this is a credit card. I can carry a balance, pay it off whenever. This is great. And several months into having my first credit card, I owed about $4,200 on a $3,500 credit limit because at 30% interest, it racks up super quick. Tough life lesson. And then I started realizing, oh, well, I actually do have a money need now, or a money problem. And the problem wasn't as much the money itself, but my mindset about the money. My why statement. Why am I doing this? And when I started cracking that open, man, that sucked. It really, really hurt, because what I saw was that I was filling myself with things that were artificial, as I mentioned earlier, and it didn't make me feel good. And not only did I not feel good now, but I also had all this debt that was piling up. And so I decided that I wanted to change it. I decided to set my eyes on something that I wanted more than what I had. And in doing so, it started making me realize that I could do something, even if it was really small. I could take small steps, and it's a lot easier to start making those steps when you have a direction that you're going. It's a lot more difficult to go nowhere when you have no destination. In Alice in Wonderland, and I always refer to this, and my friends sometimes make fun of me for it, but I love that part in Alice in Wonderland where Alice gets to a crossroads, a fork in the road, and she meets the Cheshire Cat. And while engaging the Cheshire Cat in conversation, she says, "Which way should I go?" And the cat responds, "Well, where are you headed? Where are you trying to get to?" And she said, "It doesn't matter. Just tell me which way to go." And the cat said, "Well, if you have no destination, if you don't know where you want to go, either way is the right way." And that's how we get in those modes of just allowing things to happen in our life. When we don't have a goal for our health, when we don't have a goal for our finances, when we don't have a goal for our relationships, if we don't have a goal for our thought life, if we don't have a goal for how we speak or what we do, anything goes. And that's dangerous, man. That means that you're being led by your emotions. If you look at kids are often led by their emotions. They're not taught intentionality, or they don't, as I said earlier, they just don't know intentionality yet. They don't know right from wrong. They don't know good from evil. They know what they want. And babies, they don't care about other people. They just, they're hungry, they're wet, they're uncomfortable, and all they know to do is cry about it. And unfortunately, a lot of us, myself included, just never grow out of that with regards to different things in our lives. We just cry and we cry and we cry, hoping that somebody else is going to fix it for us. But it's taking those natural emotional responses and just thinking, okay, well, I want to be a little bit more intentional about this. I don't want to allow myself to just go down this path. I want this in my life. So what behaviors and what emotional responses and things are present that are taking me away from it? I don't want that anymore. What am I going to trade here? You know, when I started thinking about buying a house or getting married, money started mattering a lot differently to me, or how I viewed it, rather. And it became a lot more personal because I wanted to go there. I wanted to get to a place where I could be married, where I could have a good relationship and be a provider. You know, every guy wants to be a provider. And I started realizing that all these stupid decisions I was making along the way were not going to take me there. And so I went to True Liant Federal Credit Union and I gave them $300 for a secured line of credit, which was the only type of credit card that I qualified for. And basically that's where they loan you your own money. How pathetic is that? Now I say pathetic, and you know, if you're in that situation, it's not pathetic. That's how I felt in the moment. Looking back, it was just irrational. It makes sense that you have to start somewhere. So I started there, and I started using the credit card. I would put $100 on it, pay it off. Put $100 on it, pay it off, and I would build that competency. And every time that I was tempted to buy something more than $300, I had to stop and think to myself, do I really want to do that? Would this $300 collector's edition game of whatever, is that really worth me giving up my financial future and possible marriage where I can be a provider one day? Is that really what I want? And I started weaning myself off of that. Man, I remember when the Xbox 360 Gears of War Special Edition system came out, and it was, I don't know, it was something dumb like $400. And we had one in my GameStop location, and I was like, I'll take that. And I just bought it. Boom, right there. And it's a stark difference between the decisions I was making when I started fixing my credit. I would have to think to myself, okay, well, I have the $400, but do I want to spend it on this? Or do I want to get out of debt? Do I really want to bring my debt into a marriage? Do I really want to bring my debt into a relationship? And I set a goal for myself. I said, I don't want to bring debt into a relationship, so I'm going to put that at the forefront. I had a destination in mind. And so because I had a destination, my why was a lot different. Why am I spending this money? Why am I not spending this money? I actually had a barometer. And that was a choice. It took intentionality and it took accountability, a consistent form of personal accountability with a goal in mind. But the why was what drove me. And some of you have a why you want to do something, and some of you have a why you want to get away from something. It's all some form of impetus. What's driving you forward? What's your motivator? And as I mentioned earlier, if you don't have a motivator that's driving you forward, you have a motivator that's keeping you in place, whether you like it or not, or whether you realize it or not. Back then, my motivator was not Back then, my motivation was filling a void in myself that I didn't realize was a void. I didn't even know that I was doing it in the moment. And that's the trap. Because I didn't ask myself why, it was an emotional response to something that was only going to be healed through intentionality. So I want to ask you guys, what is that thing in your life that would change if you defined your why? What is that one thing that dominates your thought? And it feels almost insurmountable. It's something that you wrestle with daily, and it could be an insecurity. It could be something that you think is unobtainable. For me, buying a house was unobtainable back in the day because I had a 500 credit score or something ridiculous like that. And I thought, I'm never going to get away from this. But my why had to outweigh my circumstances. So what is it for you? What would change in your life if you actually took the time to define your why? And I want to encourage you in that as you're doing this, any of those feelings that come up here of not being good enough, not being qualified, not thinking that you're worth it, not thinking that you can do it. None of that matters, really. It feels like it does. And trust me, guys, I've been there. I felt that with addictions. I've felt that way with relationships, especially. You know, when I was in my early 20s, I was really lamenting the fact that if I ever got married, I had nobody that I could say, hey, I'm gonna have you as my best man. I mean, I had my brother, but, and Brent, if you're ever watching this, I'm not saying that I don't love you. I do love you. But I didn't really have any friendships. You know, I had sincere lack of stuff back then. But what do you really want to change? What would happen if you changed it? You have to really define your why. Like, why would that even matter to me? What if on the other side of what you're dealing with right now that you hate, you wake up and you just wished it was different? What does the other side look like? For me, that looked like being able to have sex, because I decided I wasn't going to have sex until I got married. And you know, every 20-year-old guy, every teenage guy, that's a lot of what we think about. You know, we think sex, and how good it feels to use pornography and use all that stuff. I mean, that's just being honest. Everybody feels that way. Everybody desires that to some form. What would it feel like? What would it be like to own a house? And it's not the fact that houses are better than trailers. I mean, that's irrelevant, and it's absolutely not true. It's just something that I wanted. It was a goal that I never thought that I could have, because I didn't think I was worth it. What would that be like for me to own a house, to realize that I am worth that if that's what I want? What would that... What's on the other side of where you are now and where you want to be? And guys, whatever that is, whether it's financial freedom, relationships, getting out of addictions, realizing that you are worth living, realizing that you are worth being a friend to, realizing that you are worth having a specific job, realizing that you are worth having a purpose, realizing that you have something to give somebody, whatever is on the other side of where you are now, you got to take that and realize that it is for you. God designed you for stuff like that. God designed you with a purpose. He designed you with value. You know, God is a father that wants to bless you with good things. And I don't mean that from the perspective of a prosperity gospel, like God wants you to be wealthy or anything. God wants you to live a life of value. He wants you to be in a place where you understand who you are. And a lot of times, peace only comes from understanding who you are. It's that silent confidence that you see in some people. A lot of people that are truly happy. And as I mentioned earlier, happiness isn't really what it's all about in the first place. You know, happiness is great and all, but understanding your value is understanding that you have something to give. It's understanding that you have a role. Your life has a purpose. But what does it take to get there? What does it take to get from where you are to that other place? What does it take to go through the crap of defining your why? And guys, it's honesty. It's being willing to be honest with yourself. And it's also getting rid of comparison and getting rid of what other people in social media and all these other outlets of thought think. Because really, they're not the ones that are going to fix your life. They're not the ones that are going to change everything that you have the responsibility of changing. So guys, regardless of where you're going, if you're going to a place where you're just learning how to manage money, if you're getting out of a bad relationship, if you want relationships to begin with, if you want friends, whatever it is, I want to walk with you with that. I want to show you how God feels about that. The first step is hearing and understanding that you are worth pursuing that. You are worth change. You are worth growth. You are worth the grace. And you just have to take a hold of that for yourself. You have to replace the stuff in your life that you don't like with a goal of what you do like and just work towards it. It's the intentional consistency, whether your step is large or your step is really small. And guys, I'm curious to know in the comments below, just let me know what it is in your life that you want to change. What is something in your life that you've consistently not asked yourself, why do I do this? Why am I allowing this? Why is this present? And what would change if you actually asked yourself those questions and set a goal that would take you in the opposite direction? Guys, you can do this. If I can turn my life around from where I was super angry, bad with money, did not value myself, didn't think I was worth anything. The way I viewed other people was, what can you do for me? It was a very toxic mindset. That's where I came from. But I want you to take the question why very personally. Just be honest with yourself, and you don't have to tell anybody about it. That really helps. Vulnerability, especially when you divulge it to other people, there's just something magical about bringing things into the light and having a partner with that. But just be honest with yourself. What is your why? And why is it your why? Why has it been that way? Why have you allowed that to happen? And what needs to be different? What why needs to change for you? Allow yourself to dream. Allow yourself to expect. Allow yourself to hope for something more than what you have right now. Asking the question why is one of the first steps to freedom. When you begin to challenge the things inside of you that are supposed to be cultivated, are supposed to be grown, are supposed to be developed, you start realizing that it is absolutely okay to be messed up. It's okay to be broken, and it's all part of the process. We're all like that. And it doesn't matter if it's the person that you esteem the most in your life, or somebody that you admire, or the dude that you look down on because you think he's really messed up. We're all more alike than we are different. We all deal with sin. We all deal with brokenness in our own different ways. And each one of us has a different path that we have to grow through. And we all are designed to go somewhere and to do something very specific. Just understand that the things that are inside of you that you don't like, that are coming out through asking these why questions, are things that are part of your journey. They're part of the things that you are meant to tackle and address and fight. It takes courage to move forward, and it takes courage to grow yourself and be honest with yourself about where you're at, legitimately and vulnerably and honestly and completely aware of where you're at, without pride, with complete humility, saying, here's what I have to work with, and not feeling bad for that. We all start from humble beginnings, and you really shouldn't compare yourself to another person, because the life that you've been given is the life that you're meant to live. Whether it sucks or is kind of awesome, it doesn't matter. Everybody's got stuff that sucks about their lives, but don't be afraid of asking why. It's where everything begins, guys. You can do this. And God is more than ready, and He's absolutely willing to pick up the slack where you fall short, because you're going to. You're going to fail. It's part of the process. Guys, I'll see you next time.